Okay, let's start. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to National Geographic Traveller Travel Geeks. Tonight we're going to be discussing all things North Carolina. I'm really excited to have you all here. My name is Jo Fletcher Cross. I'm a contributing editor at National Geographic Traveller and I will be hosting the night. Let me just explain to you how the event will work for this evening, for those of you who haven't been to a Travel Geeks event before. So what happens is in a moment, I'm going to introduce you to our panel, and we really do have a really fantastic panel tonight. So I'm very excited to tell you all about them. And then I will chat to them. I'm going to ask them lots of questions for about 45 minutes. And then at the end, for about 15 minutes, we'll have a question and answer session. So feel free to share all your questions. If you want to ask a question to the panel, you'll see there's a Q&A button somewhere on your Zoom screen, depending what platform you're using. If you try to put your questions in there, that would be fantastic. There's also a chat function, and we'd love it if you chatted in there. We want to see you all talking to each other, giving each other advice. Also on the chat tonight, there are several of our National Geographic Traveller editorial staff who'll be sharing links with you and answering questions. So feel free to say hello to them. We we'll also be posting on the chat section a prize draw later on towards the end of the evening, where you can win some really great North Carolina prizes. So keep an eye out for that. I'll remind you of that later, but don't forget to click on that. And yeah, so let me introduce you to our panel. We've got a great one. So tonight, let me start with Chitti Kumar. Chitti is a chef. She's got a restaurant, Garland, which is in Raleigh, North Carolina. She's also in a rock band with her husband, I believe, and runs a music venue and a cocktail bar. And I think really is just about a million times cooler than I'm ever going to be. Chitti has curated a Spotify playlist of North Carolina artists, which you should all have received. And it's so brilliant. There's about half of them that I was like, I didn't know they were from North Carolina. So I hope you've all listened. If you haven't yet, the ideal opportunity would be when you are cooking along with Chitti's recipe, which we've also sent you. She's an amazing cocktail and a fantastic fish dish. So if you pop that playlist on and cook along, we're going to send a video out of Chitti demonstrating those dishes for you afterwards. So at 8 o'clock, we'll send that out to you. So you can cook along and listen to some North Carolina music and really get in the mood, I think. We've also got Emma John with us. Emma is a journalist. She writes for The Guardian and other brilliant publications, and also is the author of Wayfaring Stranger, A Musical Journey in the American South, a book that I genuinely asked for Christmas, long before we knew about this event. So it's an absolutely amazing book. I cannot recommend it enough. It's about her journey playing bluegrass fiddle in the hills of North Carolina as a very classically trained violinist, and I love it, and it's great fun. So I'm really delighted that Emma can join us this evening. We've also got Christina Riley and Carl Hedinger. And I was just saying, this is the first time we've had a couple as panelists, so I'm really excited about that too. They are the travel bloggers behind NC Tripping and its sister site Travel Through Life. So they're based in Durham in North Carolina, and they've shared more than 100 guides on their blog about their favourite places to visit in North Carolina, along with stories about the people. So I'm sure they've got lots and lots they can tell us about the state, and I'm really looking forward to asking them lots of questions. And finally, we've also got Margot Knight-Metzger. Margot leads the PR for Visit North Carolina, so I think we can say she is an expert on the state. She's also been executive director of the North Carolina Craft and Brewers Guild and the North Carolina Wine and Grape Council, which I think sound like very rewarding positions. So I'm looking forward to asking you more about drinks in North Carolina. She lives in Raleigh with her husband, 2 children and 7 chickens, and they also run a bike shop which serves beer. I've got more questions about that, but it sounds like you don't have much spare time, Margot, that's for sure. Yeah, so let's get started. I've got lots of questions, but as I say, feel free to share in the Q&A function or in the chat, but better in the Q&A because we're more likely to pick them up there, and we'll try and get through as many of your questions as we can at the end. But I want to start with one of my questions, and I'm just going to start with what I thought was an easy question, but I suspect it might be slightly tricky. And it's, if you had to choose one place to visit in North Carolina, if I said you could only go to one place, what would it be? And I think maybe I'm going to start with Margot, if that's okay. Margot, where would your one place be?
Oh, well, I've lived in North Carolina almost my whole life. I was born and raised here, and I love it from corner to corner. But my happy place is a mountain town called Brevard, and it's about an hour south of Asheville. If any of you know where that largest mountain city is, but Brevard is home to hundreds of waterfalls. It is an outdoor adventurer's paradise. If you like cycling, either mountain biking or road biking, which I do, we also run a bike shop here in Raleigh, and the town is also just really cool. There's a great vibe. It has my very favorite toy store that I've ever been in, and it is also a great beer town, which is super important to me when I'm looking for a destination. It's home to some of the most storied breweries in the South. So I have to say Brevard is my top spot.
Well, that's a fantastic one. Thank you so much. I've got more questions about that. We'll have to come back to that, I think. Carl and Christina, how about you? Where would your one place be? You can have one place each, I think. You don't have to settle on the same one.
Well, I agree with Margot. We love Brevard. Western North Carolina is one of our favorite places to travel to. Wonderfully enough, we live in Durham in the middle of the state, so it is very easy for us to 2-3 hours we're in the mountains and 2-3 hours we're at the beach. So for me, I love the mountains. So we like Boone, North Carolina. It's where Appalachian State is. There's a lot of trails for hiking and waterfalls, which are also surprisingly kid friendly, because we do take our 3.5-year-old with us everywhere we travel. So she's been to a lot of trails in Boone. So I'm gonna go with Boone.
Yeah. Same. I'm gonna second her and say Boone. It's a college town. There's plenty to eat there. There are a few breweries that are really awesome too. And it's also nearby really cool towns, Blowing Rock and Banner Elk. You could go there any time of year. You can go skiing. You can go find a swimming hole somewhere near a waterfall. Too. Yeah. I think it's hard to beat.
That's great. It was a nice harmonious answer too. That was lovely. Emma, you talk about Boone in your book. Would Boone be your destination, or is it?
Well, I do, and I've got to say, yeah. I mean, I would be in trouble if I didn't say Boone, because that's where a lot of my friends are from, and I really miss them, and I want to see them. But I have to say that, you know, the people of Boone, in a classic, please don't discover our secret fashion, always ask me not to talk about it, because they want it to stay perfect and stay hidden. So you didn't hear about Boone from me. So I'm just gonna send people back Carl and Christina's way and say the place I would love to spend more time is Chapel Hill. Actually, Chapel Hill, another beautiful college town, really kind of famous for its incredible basketball team, where Michael Jordan became a star, and it's so relaxing and elegant, and there's a calm gentility about it, and it has incredible bars and gastronomy. The cocktail bars, really, they are phenomenal. And some really great music venues. So I'd like to spend more time there. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you, Emma. That sounds fantastic. What about you, Chitti? Where would your one place be?
Well, I'm going to go to the other side of the state, because I am a person who is just drawn to the ocean. I'll take any beach anywhere, but and we've spent a lot of time last summer. My husband and I would drive every Sunday to Emerald Isle, and we had a secret little spot. You know, it was the pandemic. We weren't staying overnight. We would do day picnics and just talk about life and the things that are important to us, and recharge. And we take little cocktail kits with us and have a picnic. And there was nobody around, and it was just a really important place for us to reset. That was Emerald Isle. But I'm going to say, in my whole, if I look at, where do I want to go? The very tip end of Topsail Island, which is kind of like one long island. Topsail and Surf City are places that our band went a lot when we were just getting started. And Paul, my husband's parents, had a little apartment there, and we had some rowdy nights where we wrote a lot of music and went out on the beach, and no, we did not light fireworks and the police did not come. But and there's a wonderful little fish market on the dock at Surf City, and you know, I can just go, and they have coolers that it's not even a shop, it's literally an outdoor dock area, and you just pick out the fish that they're just bringing in. They have a little oyster, this big wheel thing that they clean oysters with. It's just like a place that is timeless, and it really it does something to my soul, and I love it out there.
Wow, thank you so much, Chitti. That was amazing. They all sound like such incredibly diverse places. I loved that everyone had really different answers. Thank you so much. I've got so many kind of general questions, but I'd like to dig down a little bit. Everyone's mentioned food. Chitti, I'm going to come to you because obviously you are a chef, and I want to talk to you a little bit about your restaurant to start with, if that's okay. I've got a quote here. It says, your menus at Garland are described as seasonally driven, influenced by the flavors of India and Asia, with locally sourced ingredients reinvented with a distinctly southern flair. And I wondered if you could help us maybe understand what that southern flair means. You know, we talked about, you know, we titled this Mountains, Moonshines and Barbecue, knowing that we wouldn't just talk about barbecue, obviously, but I think people have got a perception that that might be the food that you would get. But what would you sum up kind of southern flair as? And why does it marry with Asian ingredients?
Yeah, I mean, the South is such a diverse place. It's a big place, and North Carolina has its own culinary history and its own culinary culture. But you know, it's important to remember that we're such an agricultural place, and there's a lot of produce. There are a lot of farmers. You know, the fishermen I mentioned earlier, and then you know, of course, there's a lot of hog raising and poultry, and so it becomes, when you think about it from the perspective of somebody who sources ingredients, it's sort of like paradise, you know. Seasons are ripe and rich, and even in the dead of winter, you know, yeah, we might get sick of collards and sweet potatoes, but there's a lot here, and I can go at any point to the farmer's market and find something that's been just pulled out of the ground and cook with it. And so I think, to me, Southern flair isn't about the caricature, you know, mac and cheese and coleslaw. It's about the things that actually get grown here. And to me, that is the link between how Southerners have always lived and how people in Asia live. And certainly the people, my people in Northern India, I mean, the farmer's market it looks a little bit different when you think about the layout. There are things on the ground there, and here we have tables, but the mounds of turnips and carrots and okra and eggplant and tomatoes and all of that, it's the same food, really. It's just seasoned a little different. And you know, we can talk about the history of the South and how things got here, and how the vegetables that we take for granted as Southern really originated in other places. So there's a lot of digging, no pun intended, that can be done when you talk about Southern food, and particularly the food of North Carolina. So I find that to be endlessly inspiring and kind of seamless to put the flavors of my childhood into the ingredients that come from here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chitti. What a great answer. You know, I'm absolutely desperate to come to your restaurant. The minute we can fly to North Carolina, you know, I urge everyone to check it out. Look online. The menus look incredible. Can I just ask, I'm going to ask this question to everyone, but I'll start with you, Chitti, because we're talking to you now. But what's the best thing you have ever eaten in North Carolina? What sticks in your mind?
Oh gosh. There's so much, you know. I think all of my memories revolve around food. Do I have to pick one? I mean, I remember
maybe give you two.
You know, the first tomato sandwich of the summer is always like dripping down your leg, juicy tomato on soft white bread and mayonnaise, salt and pepper, and nothing else. You know, the first peach of the summer. I'm looking forward to summer. Can you tell? There was this corn dish that they had at Poole's Diner in Raleigh, Ashley Christensen's restaurant. And it was like this soft, cloudy, foamy thing. And it was just a revelation just devoted to corn. There were things I had at Kurate in Asheville, Katie Button's restaurant, that, you know, bites of marinated pork that I'll just kind of never forget the texture of it, the sweet, sour, sticky kind of thing. barbecue at the Skylight and Sam Jones in Ayden, North Carolina. There's a lot. Shrimp burger at the Big Oak. How much time do we have?
There's a whole hour of Chitti's list of
a
things.
ton. Yeah. People are really dedicated to food here.
Yeah, I'm getting that sense. I'm really regretting asking this question before I've eaten as well. Margot, how about you? What's the best thing you've ever eaten, or maybe 2 or 3 or 6?
Well, I think my favorite thing is something that was really special to me as a child. I grew up in the middle of North Carolina, but on the eastern half of North Carolina and the western half, there are these distinct barbecue traditions. And I grew up going to the east. That's where my family was from. And so we would get to eat whole hog barbecue, which is very much a North Carolina tradition that goes back several centuries. And you roast the entire hog over hickory wood, and it takes 12 to 15 hours to roast the meat. And then if you're in the east, it's chopped, and it is sauced with this sharp vinegar red pepper sauce that just kind of gives this nice counterpoint to the fatty meat. And you put it on a bun. You can put slaw on it or not. And it is just the most pure essence of meat and the most pure essence of North Carolina food for me. And then my second favorite would be honeysuckle sorbet from Bill Smith's restaurant in Chapel Hill, called Crook's Corner. And speaking of essence, I don't even know if honeysuckle grows in the UK, but it's a vine. And when we were kids, we would pluck them and kind of suck the sweet juice out of there. And this man, he's all heart, and he would take all of these honeysuckle blossoms from all over Chapel Hill and make a sorbet that's frozen sorbet and just share it with whoever was in the restaurant that day. And it was just this revelation of flavor and seasonality, unlike anything I had ever seen before. So Those are 2 very different North Carolina foods that stick with me.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, we do have honeysuckle in the UK, but I suspect not quite to the extent that you do there. My neighbours have got some. I might go and suck some out. It starts growing. I haven't tried it before. Don't know what they'll think of me. What about Carl and Christina? What about you? You are allowed to have separate loves as far as food is concerned.
About 2 years ago, we went on this barbecue trail mission that we were going to eat our way through all of the historic barbecue pits in North Carolina. And among we went on my birthday to Ayden, North Carolina, to go to Skylight Inn. One of the best bites I've ever had, because you'll have that whole hog barbecue, but in Sam Jones's barbecue, it's chopped up in a way that the skin is just so crispy and crackling, and you mix that with the moist barbecue, and it's still a bite that first bite that I'll never forget. And you swig that down with some cheer wine or sweet tea, and you have a taste of North Carolina, and that's my favorite bite.
Yeah, that one's good.
Yes.
For me, there are a couple of different places I would think. Here in Durham, we have an amazing little Cuban restaurant in town called Copa. They make farm-to-table food. They have a farm in a town nearby that they grow the food from. Best small plates and cocktails to go with it. My favorite is one where they blow Cuban cigar smoke into it. That's one. And then another would be right off of I-95. It's not technically North Carolina barbecue, but it's competition style. It's called Redneck Barbecue Lab. And it's just amazing.
You get a fat redneck that's the name of the sandwich. So it's got pulled pork on it, and then brisket. Is there mac and cheese on it?
Yeah, there's so much. And collards too.
And collards too, yeah.
And then they have burnt ends on Tuesdays and Saturdays.
Tuesday, Thursdays, Saturdays.
Yes. And they have a drive-through. So if you're on I-95, you can just pull off the interstate, go right through. It's pretty fast, and then get right back on to where you're going.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That was good. Two quite different things there, but all, combined that as well. Emma, what about you? You're obviously not from North Carolina. Did anything surprise you about what you ate? What was most exciting?
Yes, so I would say the one thing that was really stuck with me, I did not get on board with the idea of biscuits, of Southern style biscuits, because obviously as a Brit, I know that a biscuit is a sweet cookie, and it crumbles, and then these biscuits would turn up on my plate alongside meat and gravy, white gravy as well. The gravy wasn't even brown. I didn't understand what was happening. And there would be these kind of, sort of soft, almost scone-like things, again, because scones are different over there too. So these were like English scones, and but they were savory, and I just did not get on board with them. People kept trying to get me to eat them, and often it would happen when we were at a takeout. So I'd be at Bojangles or somewhere, and so I know I was not eating like top quality biscuits. And then after about being there quite a few months, my friend eventually took me to a place called Biscuit Head in Asheville, and I thought, well, I'm not going to enjoy this. And he said, no, you're going to love it. It's this is proper brunch. We're going to go and do this. And of course, it's the kind of place where there's a massive line outside, and I'm thinking, I'm going to be so cross if I get in there and all there is to eat is biscuits, because I do not like biscuits. And these things, I mean, they were enormous. They were about the size of my head, but they were the most like light, floury, fluffy, delicious. I can't even describe them. It was heaven. And then they are flavored and piled on top with either jam or bacon or maple syrup or whatever you like. It was like the most indulgent alternative to having pancakes for breakfast or something like that. So that was a really special moment for me, because it was a moment I overcame my fear of biscuits. And but the other thing that I have to mention, when I think of like, if the question is like, what is the one thing that you want to eat from North Carolina right now, there's a cookie company in Boone called the Appalachian Cookie Company, and they make a cookie called the Ron Swanson cookie, and it has peanut butter, maple syrup, and bacon in it. And I have never tasted a better cookie in my life.
I'm fully on board for that. That's amazing. Put bacon in it. That's great. I could see that somebody mentioned in the chat there that said, I think you're stuffed if you're vegetarian. I'm sure that's not true. Good vegetarian food? Where would you go for good vegetarian food in North Carolina? Everywhere?
Well, there's a meat and three tradition in the South, and pretty much any like casual eatery will have a board on their wall, and every day there's a list of like 15 vegetables and like 2 or 3 meat specials, and you can get a vegetable plate. And I was a vegetarian for a really long time, and that when I moved to the South, that's what I ate. I got vegetable plates, and you don't even miss the meat. You get collards or black-eyed peas or turnip greens or mashed potatoes, mac and cheese will be on there, squash casserole. I mean, the list is endless, and it's shocking to me now when I think about it. Like, man, they prepared 15 sides every single day, and they rotate. I mean, that's the OG farm to table,
Yeah. It does sound as amazing produce, and I think that makes a big difference. If you're a vegetarian, sure, and it's just you're having the sides, it's a bit different if it's something amazing, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just a thali, right? It's just a bunch of great vegetables. They're not afterthoughts. They are absolutely, prepared the way they should be.
I want to talk about drink, really. Just because I'm Scottish. We call this Mountains, Moonshine and Barbecue. So I want to ask about moonshine. I mean, what is it? Why is it associated with North Carolina? And what are you supposed to do with it? Margot, maybe you can help us with this one.
Sure. So there's just a little short history lesson on moonshine and what it is. In the United States, we had something called Prohibition that lasted quite a while, and this is in the early 20th century. And in the South, Prohibition lasted even longer. And during that time, alcohol was not allowed. You were not allowed to make it, buy it, consume it, unless it was for communion. And so there was a tradition in the hills of North Carolina. So as you start to come up from the Piedmont into the higher elevations, there are plenty of places to hide a still. And folks just, in order to help make a living, I mean, these were a lot of them Scots-Irish immigrants who brought, or German immigrants who had the skills of distilling, knew how to do it, and were living hand to mouth and needed some income. And so they started to make corn liquor because corn was abundant. And what you get from that is just a white whiskey, sometimes called white lightning or called moonshine because it was made at night under the light of the moon so you could avoid being caught by the law or the police. And so there was a strong tradition of that for many years in North Carolina. People still make it today, both illegally and legally. So you can find now some craft distillers. We have a lot of breweries, wineries, and now we have a lot of distilleries in North Carolina. And some of them are taking that old tradition and, making it for commercial consumption. And how do you drink moonshine? Well, if in the old times, somebody would just hand you a jar and you would take a swig. A lot of times it's flavored with whatever fruit you could get your hands on. So maybe it was peaches or cherries or, whatever you had growing, or strawberries, you could flavor it and take a little bit of the burn away. But the more modern moonshines sometimes do have that flavor, but they're great as a base for a cocktail. I think that's probably my favorite way to use moonshine. But fun fact, moonshine is the reason that NASCAR exists. NASCAR being a huge sport here in the United States, our biggest motorsport, because all those people who were making moonshine in the mountains needed to get it to their customers down in the city. And they had to outrun the law. And how were they going to do that? Well, they also knew how to work on engines. And so they would soup up these engines of just a regular stock car and make it faster than police cars. And they would outrun the law. This is people like Junior Johnson, who some of you may have heard of, a very famous moonshiner and NASCAR driver. But that is how NASCAR was born, was from these guys running moonshine. And then they started racing each other, and the rest is history.
That's so cool.
I'd be interested to know, because my experience of encountering moonshine is mostly from being in the mountains, where I spent a lot of my time in Western North Carolina. And the thing I found really interesting about this sort of supposedly kind of illicit activity is that everybody had a moonshine guy, like everybody. So you didn't have to look far. You didn't, it wasn't kind of like, oh, how do I ask the right questions? It was like, if you got invited somewhere, especially as an outsider, the first thing that people wanted to do was make sure that I tasted some moonshine. And the thing I learned in the mountains was that everybody thinks their moonshine guy is the best. Everybody, they'll say, oh, this stuff is the really good stuff. It's not like all that other terrible stuff you get. That everyone thinks that their supplier is the best one. But I don't know if that's true everywhere else in the state.
I bet it is.
Yeah. And still to this day, even though it's okay to be a home brewer or a home winemaker, another fun fact about the United States, a person cannot distill their own spirits for their own consumption. We have a very funny and difficult relationship with hard liquor or spirits in the United States. And we still don't allow people to make their own, which is why there's still that ongoing tradition of just doing it yourself in the woods.
I love it.
I will say that if you go to Wilkesboro, North Carolina, you can go to the Call Family Distilleries, and there you can see, if you take a little tour, and they're happy to show you back there, they have original cars from the bootlegging days where you can kind of look inside, and nothing has been changed because their family is still running the stills and still making moonshine today with his recipes, and pictures everywhere of where they had the moonshiners and the law next to each other years later, discussing and talking about the stories of running and making moonshine in the hills.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds kind of fun, doesn't it? To a certain extent. I love it. Thanks so much for that. That is so interesting. And obviously, moonshine is not the only thing available to drink. My big surprise, in fact, when I started researching North Carolina, was that the first grape was grown in found in North Carolina. I wouldn't say in the UK we would know North Carolina as a wine destination, but there's 200 wineries. There's lots of places, aren't there, where you can go and drink. Where would you, have you all got places that you like to go to wineries that you recommend, or places you can see your drink? Margot, I think I'll have to ask you this again. I think this is your wheelhouse, isn't it?
Yeah, I do have a thing for beverages. The grape you're referring to is called the mother vine, and it is the oldest grapevine in North America. It is the size of a massive tree trunk. I've seen it with my own eyes. It's right on the coast in Manio, which is along the Outer Banks, the string of barrier islands all along North Carolina. And that is a species of grape we call Muscadine. It has nothing to do with Muscadet, by the way, a very different flavor profile. It's a big, fat grape. It's called Vitis rotundifolia because it is so big and round, and it has a thick skin, and you make a sweet wine from it. And that is a very Southern tradition. But then as time went on, people realized you could grow Vitis vinifera grapes, which are the varietals you're familiar with, like Cabernet, Chardonnay, and more, and more of those styles in Western North Carolina. And so there are about 200 wineries in the state, as you said, but 50 of them are concentrated in this area called the Yadkin Valley. And it's a beautiful setting in the foothills as you're kind of going up into those higher elevations, beautiful rolling hills full of vineyards. One of my favorites is called Divine Llama Vineyards, because along with your wine tasting, you can go on a 2-mile llama trek. So the wines are great, but the experiences that go with them are also really fun.
It's really, I mean, the wine country is really pretty. Does Elkin count as Yadkin Valley?
Yes, it does. Elkin is in Yadkin Valley. It's a beautiful little town. They love wine there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they have there's a winery not a winery, a vintner there, where some of my friends play music in the front of the shop, and it's just it's so lovely to like be sort of walking around this wine shop, sipping the wine at the same time as you've got a couple of locals playing old time music. It's very, very relaxing, and I think I'm right in saying that was all tobacco farms that have now been converted to growing wine.
Yeah, it used to be that the economy in North Carolina, I mean, it's still agriculture is our biggest industry, believe it or not, even though we're such a modern economy with biotech and everything else. But as Chitti said, agriculture here is huge. And for the longest time, even the eastern part of North Carolina, the western part of North Carolina, the economy was very dependent on tobacco. But since fewer and fewer people use tobacco, people were looking for something else to grow. You could have a really small farm and grow tobacco and make a living because it was a high value crop. And that's really hard to replace. But wine and wine grapes are one of the best options for trading out and still growing something on your land.
They'll still drink wine. That's good. I mean, it says
one vice for the other.
That's right.
One at a time. Chitti, do you source North Carolina wine for your restaurant and your bar? Do you?
No, we haven't really. We definitely use Muscadine grapes and Scuppernong grapes in our on our menus when they're in season in the fall. We do have a lot of North Carolina beer because North Carolina has quickly become one of the biggest craft brewery states in the country. So, between the venue and the restaurant and the bar, we can rotate taps all year long and not repeat. And that's pretty great. And there's a lot of distillers too. North Carolina gin is there's some really great gins being produced here too.
Amazing. And yeah, I've seen a lot about craft beer. So yeah, where would you go if you wanted to do a craft beer trail, for instance? If you wanted to visit a lot of microbreweries, is there a particularly good place to go?
Well, depends on where you are, because I think every city and even small towns have places. Here in Raleigh and in Durham, Ponysaurus and Trophy Brewing are doing excellent work. There's Burial, there's, and I'm gluten-free, so I don't even drink that much beer. Let's see, we've got Ancillary and Crank Arm. God, Marga, there's help me out here.
There are 300 breweries. And I see in the chat somebody saying Asheville, which is known as Beer City, USA. It has the highest concentration of breweries, more than anywhere else in the United States. But Chitti's right that almost every town has a brewery now, and I would liken it to what you all have as pubs. It's very much a community gathering place. Our tap rooms sort of serve that purpose. They're kid friendly, sometimes dog friendly. And I think what makes our beer scene unique is really an effort to make it seasonal, just like the conversation we've been having about our food. The agricultural bounty still translates when you're talking about beer. We're not necessarily.
Full Team in Durham is so dedicated to sourcing things like pawpaw and basil in the summer, and they'll go out of their way to get ginger that's grown locally and feature that in their beer. And every year it's a little bit of an experiment because nature isn't the same every year, so it's kind of it's a real agricultural product for sure.
It's so interesting, Margaret, that you say that that a lot of them are kid friendly. I have a child and I probably wouldn't have thought to take her on a craft beer tour, but now I will. Carl and Christina, you've got a small daughter, like you said, if you were bringing in a child to North Carolina, where would you recommend as a really good family friendly destinations?
Well, I think our goal as far as traveling has always been our kid goes with us everywhere that we go, even if it's not kid friendly. We've found a way to incorporate her into those things, and North Carolina has really been the best place to be able to do that. If you go to the coast, you've got great family activities in the Outer Banks, from the tallest dunes at Jockey's Ridge. Head a little south to Wilmington and you have Battleship North Carolina and a lot of children's museums. As you move in towards the Piedmont, we've taken our daughter to every single brewery imaginable, and nobody has ever said anything to us. Starting at 6 weeks, it was we're taking a baby around.
Well done.
It's family friendly, and that's one of the things that we really love is that we find North Carolina to be really accessible for families of young children, older children. Really, you can tailor your adventure around anywhere you need to go in North Carolina.
I could think of at least a handful of breweries that are family friendly. Like on the Outer Banks is Weeping Radish out in Currituck County. It's the oldest microbrewery in North Carolina too, so that'd be a little historical visit. Dirtbag Ales in Cumberland County.
They've got a playground.
Big playground.
And the best cold brew mocha porter you'll ever find.
Yeah.
And a playground. It's kind of...
You are genuinely living the dream here.
As somebody who sort of came from the outside, one of the things I found really interesting about society in North Carolina and the way that community works is that it is incredibly intergenerational. In a way that I don't see here, at home living in London, in city life. I was traveling around very specifically, you know, in a particular kind of musical circuit, but it just felt like it went through every kind of aspect of life. Was that there was this real openness between the generations. There was a real closeness between people of grandparent age and kids and everything in between, and a real openness towards everyone, really. I mean, it's a very welcoming place.
That is what I was going to ask you about, Emma, actually. I mean, obviously in your book, what really comes across is that you are, I mean, really welcomed in, and you obviously went there with a violin in hand, you know, to play music. But do you think that would be the kind of welcome you would get as a tourist? You know, is it just a welcoming place in general?
I mean, yeah. So my friend Andrew in Boone, he said to me, you can always tell that there's a tradition in Boone that people come up from Florida to the mountains when it gets too hot in Florida. They travel up to Boone, and he said, oh, when you walk around town, you can always tell the people who've come up from Florida, because they're the ones who, when you like talk to them or like smile at them, they sort of grab hold of their children's hands and look a bit nervous. And it's so true. It took me a while to get used to it, walking through town, and just just people, literally passers by in the street, smiling and saying hello to you. And I would think, do I know you? Have I met you before? Am I supposed to, like, what is this? And it took me a little while to get used to it, because it's just so easy and friendly. And certainly traveling as a single person, there is nowhere better, because there is nothing strange about sitting and eating on your own. In fact, you sit and eat on your own, you'll get the best service, you'll get wonderful conversation, and you'll probably get invited onto somebody else's table. There's nothing kind of a bit sort of like needy or sleazy about going to a bar on your own. You sit at the counter, the bartender will treat you like an absolute, queen, or a king if you're a man, and you will get really friendly conversation from the people around you. It's just an easy place to make friends, I think.
Well, that is so lovely. I just want to remind people watching to get your questions into the Q&A, because I'll move on to them pretty soon. I need another hour or two, I think, to ask all the questions I've got so many. We haven't talked about music, so I'm going to come back to you, because I really want to talk about music. Obviously, there's this great bluegrass tradition in North Carolina, as well as lots of other kinds of music. As Chitti's shown with her incredible playlist, there is a just vast range of musical styles. But Emma, I wanted to ask you if you were going to recommend, if somebody wanted to go and do a kind of musical exploration, particularly for bluegrass, where would you send them to?
Well, I mean, Asheville, we've said it's the beer capital. It's also, and it's a music city. I mean, it's almost sort of, it's funny because it sounds like Nashville. So when you're talking to people in the UK about it, they often mistake you and think you said you've gone to Nashville, and you have to say, no, I went to Asheville. But it is as much of a music city in a way as Nashville. It doesn't have the recording industry there, but what it does have is just the most incredible live music scene, and it spans everything from folk and bluegrass and old time to rock and pop, and it has these wonderful venues like the Grey Eagle and the Orange Peel, and it's somewhere that musicians love to play, because it's a city of musicians, and so they know that not only are they going to get a good gig and get appreciated, but they're also going to get to hang out with loads of other cool musicians. There's a really wonderful venue there called Isis Music Hall, which I thoroughly recommend. It's like a kind of cabaret style bar with different kinds of gigs every week, but also regular on stage jams. So that definitely, but also really the kind of way to get into the real traditional local regional music is to be a bit brave and to go to things like Fiddler's conventions and music festivals during the summer, basically from April to the end of September. Every town there is music in every town almost every weekend. You cannot avoid it, especially like I would say, towards the mountains. But to be honest, this was true of everywhere I went. And just go to the local festivals, because it might sound like, oh, this is just a small little local town festival. I can guarantee you, even if there's only a dozen people watching, the musicians on stage are going to be as good as anything you could see in the Albert Hall in London. You know, that is the quality of the music there. It's insane. All these just local players who are never going to be heard of outside their town, and they are at the absolute top of their game. So yeah, so just it might seem like a slightly, you know, more brave thing to do, to be like, oh, there's a old time fiddlers convention, but these things happen all over. There's a really great one at a place called Fiddler's Grove, which is sort of more towards the middle of the state, down in the Piedmont, and there's one in, I mean, they're everywhere, to be honest. There's a great one called Happy Valley that happens in September over Labor Day weekend. And then there are these much bigger festivals, which are like, honestly, as big as Glastonbury. So you've got things like Merlfest that happens in Wilkesboro in April. You've got World of Bluegrass, which happens in Raleigh in September. And the streets, you know, for Raleigh, well, I mean, you know, there are Raleigheites here, but like the World of Bluegrass is just the most insane thing. It just takes over the streets. Tens of thousands of people listening to free concerts by some of the best bands in the country.
Yeah. And Emma, I love hearing you I love hearing your love of North Carolina music. I mean, I grew up listening to bluegrass. My dad's a banjo player, and I grew up going to Merlfest since I was a little baby, and to all those other ones you mentioned. And then all my dreams came true as an adult when the World of Bluegrass Festival came to Raleigh. It came here. They left Nashville and they decided to move it to Raleigh, and it has become the biggest festival in all of Raleigh, which is one of the biggest cities in North Carolina. And you're right, it's just everywhere you turn, there's bluegrass music, and every iteration of that for 3 or 4 days. You can just be awash in, you know, fiddles and banjos and dobros and all of this incredible music, and hopefully that'll happen in September. And I think Merlfest has been moved to September this year because of the pandemic, but
oh, I hope so. I think we're just about to be able to start planning travel. I really hope. I think we're all going to be on a plane as soon as we can get there. We'll be like, hi everyone, we're coming to stay. We're going to have to move on to the Q&A from our audience. Don't forget, those of you watching, there is the prize draw. You have to be in the UK or Ireland to enter. There are 5 prizes. The main one is it includes a copy of Emma's amazing book, and also Deep Run Roots, which is a North Carolina cookbook, and also a very cool Visit Raleigh denim tote. So get in there and enter. And I've got some questions. So my first question, which I absolutely love, it says, has anyone tried Eggs Neptune? It's Eggs Benedict with crab meat, which is quite weird because it was in our latest issue of National Geographic Traveller Food. We've got the cover story is about breakfast around the world, and it mentioned Eggs Benedict. Someone says, try it at Havana's on Carolina Beach, North Carolina. Eggs Neptune, have we tried this? Is this a big North Carolina thing?
I've not heard of that before, but it sounds delicious.
Yeah. Sounds good, right?
Yeah. Good name.
Apparently it's amazing. So, you know, I mean, I guess anywhere with really, really great seafood, you know, and crab, that sounds like one to try.
Crab and eggs and hollandaise, yes, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, well, I recommend we all try it. And then what's the best time of year to visit? Someone's asking. You know, are there mosquitoes, ticks, bugs? Margot, what would you say? When is the best time to approach North Carolina?
Well, it kind of depends on your destination, but I would say that the typical travel season here is quite long. We just have a very warm and pleasant climate for most of the year, from March even through December. It's comfortable outside. We do have mosquitoes, but we also have some nice breezes that blow them away when you're at the beach. That tends to be the high season, the summertime, because that's when kids are out of school, and when attractions would, you know, have the most visitors. But it really can be a year-round destination. It's quite warm here in the winter, and it's not nearly as hot as Florida in the summer.
I have to say, springtime in North Carolina is magical. Like right now, the sky is crystal clear blue, the air is crisp, and it just feels like, you know, promise is in the air.
I would make a bid for fall, actually. I think fall is incredible in the mountains. It's, these are the same mountains that are the ones that stretch all the way up to Maine, so they're getting the same fall colors as you get up there, and New England's fall is like really famous, and North Carolina's famous locally and maybe within the US, but certainly not famous in the UK. So really good time to go.
Like Carla, Christina, if you plump for winter, that you'll have covered the entire year there. Everyone has recommended a season.
Never a bad time to be in North Carolina.
I've got another question here that's asked about wildlife, actually, and we've barely touched on adventure and outdoors, and there's so many places. Carla and Christina, you obviously talked about, adventure and waterfalls and all these incredible places. But what about wildlife? Is there good wildlife spotting to be had?
So I think it depends on the time of year. Like right now, well, probably December to January would be great if you're on the East Coast for winter birding. Tons of birds migrate from north to south. And then
the elk.
The elk at the end of the Blue Ridge Parkway. It's over near Bryson City, Maggie Valley. If you get there a couple hours after sunrise or before sunset, you'll see these massive herds of elk just crossing through. It's their and like native migration path. It's awesome to watch. Just don't get too close.
Yeah.
No.
That's in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park area, which happens to be the most visited national park in all of the US. But I want to take you to the other end of the state and talk about my favorite wildlife.
Go ahead, Margaret.
So I mentioned earlier that we have barrier islands called the Outer Banks, and they're just a mile or two wide, and they run all the way down the coastline. And there are several colonies of wild horses that live in various parts of the Outer Banks. And these are descendants of some of the earliest expeditions to America from, Spanish explorers. So these are descendants of Spanish Mustangs, and they still live wild. They're left alone for the most part. You can see them from your boat. You can see them sometimes from the shore in Beaufort, but it is the most amazing thing. You can hear about it, but then you see them and you're like, oh my, wild horses. And there they are, like running and splashing through the surf, and it takes your breath away.
Wow. Well, that is an incredibly good answer. So I can't beat wild horses. We've talked about moonshine, we've talked about wine, we've talked about what about cider? Is there a cider tradition anywhere in North Carolina? Is that a big thing anywhere?
It's getting to be, for sure. I don't know how old it is, but there's a lot of great apples in the western part of the state. So I think I've had some really delicious ciders.
Yeah, I would be surprised if cider isn't like on the up, because just like Chitti says, I mean, I one of my friends who I go and stay with is in a tiny little town called Taylorsville, and this town is obsessed with apples. It like literally celebrates apples 4 times a year. It has like an apple festival and an apple butter festival and an apple pie festival. And so I feel there should be a cider festival.
There is. We got a lot of apples, and I would say that ciders are on the upswing. There's a long tradition of making cider in North Carolina, but so I would say that it's centered around Hendersonville, which is just south of it's sort of near Brevard, which I mentioned was my happy place, not too far from Asheville. And as you go on up the Blue Ridge Parkway, up along the ridge of the Appalachian Mountains, that's all apple country. And there are some great places where you can pick apples and enjoy some old time music and drink cider.
It's funny you mentioned Asheville there, because that's one of our other questions actually. Is someone said, have you got any recommendations for must-dos for a short stay in Asheville? Maybe a good bar to visit?
There's a lot of great restaurants for sure. I think I mentioned Kurate earlier, Chai Pani. There are All Souls Pizza is like a Neapolitan style pizza place, but they also have a lot of small plates. Bar wise, I'm blanking on the name, Margot. Everybody.
There's that
Well, there's MG Road. I love.
The road is not there anymore.
Oh shoot.
Yeah.
What
What
about
is-
that great bookshop that's also a champagne bar?
Wow.
Oh yeah. Maybe somebody will chime in the chat. I'm
Yeah.
blanking on
Because
that
that's
too.
what I'm going to say for my must do's in Asheville. You know, there you are going to trip over yourself with bars and
It's in the
restaurants.
arcade. Yeah.
You can't kind of go wrong. But my must do whenever I go to Asheville is I go on a bookshop crawl, because their secondhand and firsthand bookshops are incredible. Malaprops, which is a big bookstore across several floors. Captain's Bookshelf, which which specializes in beautiful old editions and even some first editions, but they will welcome anyone for a browse, and you're bound to find something you like in there. And then there's the one in the arcade whose name I've forgotten, which is also a champagne bar, which is amazing.
Yep.
But yeah, there's several like that.
I can't really believe it, but we have actually come to the end of our time. So I've got a list of questions as long as my arm that I still want to ask. I could be here for another hour, but we do have to bring it to an end. I'm so sorry. I just really want to say thank you so much to what a wonderful panel. I could have listened to you all night. Thank you so much for giving your time and giving all your recommendations. To everyone in the chat who's given recommendations, I'm really, really happy. To our lovely sponsor, Visit North Carolina. I mean, honestly, let's all go. I want to go so bad I want to cry. So yeah, we'll be coming to say hello, I'm sure, very soon. So thank you so much everyone for coming and to our brilliant panel. We've got a actual real life event coming up, which I feels like a dream, which is our food festival. So if you've enjoyed talking about food tonight, please, it's in London on the 17th and 18th of July 2021. You can still get early bird tickets, which are just £10. We've got some incredible chefs, masterclasses and workshops. So yeah, please, you can see the ticket link there, but you can also look on our website and book tickets through there. We've also got another virtual event coming up at the end of this month, which is going to be pretty different to this one. It's going to be exploring rural Japan, specifically looking at Tohoku. So I'm really looking forward to that one. That's going to be another incredibly fun one. So please join us for that. That's on the 23rd of March, I believe. And the other thing is that if you are a writer or photographer, or you are now inspired to be by hearing all these incredible people, do join us at our masterclasses. They're on sale now. They are £10 each. We've got 6 classes over 3 days, and they're £10 each or £50 for 5. And you can find more information about them on our website, which I'm sure someone will put in the chat any minute now. You can book for those now. If you're not already a subscriber to National Geographic Traveller, then we would love to have you subscribe. We've got an offer on at the moment. If you put that offer code into our website, 2021-trial, you can try out National Geographic Traveller and National Geographic Traveller food for just £10. So thank you so much again to everyone. And before we go, we've got a little taste, a little message from National Geographic. But thank you so much for joining us, and good night.
Thank you.
This is not a border or a frame. It doesn't bind us or limit us. It is a portal, an entrance to the whole world, and a means to make it better. Every place, story, and passion lies through here. And for more than 130 years, this is where we explorers and innovators have gone. And going, it has been part of our mission to give back, reinvesting part of our profits into the future explorers and their passions. This portal is the threshold of the next chapter of humanity, where we don't just see the world, we change it. Come with us, and together, we'll go further.